Now, this is one that you probably haven't heard about, okay? But this is super important. Have you heard that the Earth's magnetic field is weakening dramatically?
Yes, it's changing.
Dramatically weakening, though.
I didn't know it was dramatic.
Does that mean we weigh less? I haven't noticed on the scale. That's important to me.
If only, Roxanne, if only it was the gravitational field.
So that's what's doing it to me.
Wrong field.
Wrong field. This is
I thought it was my magnetic pull that made the scale.
It is. If you wear earrings that are too big, you get heavier. It pulls you down. But no, in all seriousness, the magnetic field is very important because what the magnetic field actually does is it makes a shield. Okay. It makes a shield around our planet here. And it does that by actually holding on to some of the high-energy solar particles. So we've got this magnetic field that exists because, remember, there's a core of iron in our planet that's molten iron that's kind of churning around, and that's what's creating, at least as best we understand it, that's what's creating the magnetic field that goes around the Earth, comes out of the North Pole and goes down and comes back up into the South Pole. That's the direction of the flow of magnetic field.
And does that bounce things away from us?
Well, it does because it's holding, like a magnet, it's holding all these high-energy particles that it's grabbed. It's picked up from the sun. And so those now make a shield against the other high-energy particles that the sun just constantly putting out high-energy particles. And so that's why if we were on a planet like a Mars, which has no operating magnetic field and has no atmosphere, we would be getting bombarded with these high-energy particles, and that would basically fry you if you were just out in the open and you could breathe on Mars. But what I want to tell you about is we've known that the magnetic field's been weakening for quite some time, and it's been weakening at about 5% a century. So every 100 years, it gets about 5% weaker. But we've just collected some satellite data, and that's telling us that the rate of decay of the magnetic field has sped up to 5% every decade. So 5% every 10 years instead of every 100 years. That's a 10 times increase in the speed at which the magnetic field is decaying. Now, what you're expecting to see, and there's lots of talk about this, as the magnetic field gets weaker, the shield is going to operate less well. So what you're going to expect to see is more high-energy particles are going to get through that shield and going to interact with us here on the surface, but they'll just pass right through you at speeds that are almost beyond belief, at the speed of light, essentially. These things are going to pass right through you, and this is going to produce things like increases in damage to DNA, which are probably going to lead to increases in rates of cancer and other diseases that can come from DNA mutations. It can also harm our power grid. Because, I don't know if you remember you wouldn't remember it, but back in the 1800s, there was this thing called the Carrington event where a solar storm, really had a massive effect on the existing electrical infrastructure at that time. And if we had an infrastructure that we have in place now, it would have essentially shut our entire country down. The storm was that powerful, and we could experience another one of those. So as the magnetic field is weakening, it's kind of, there are little holes that are opening up. It's constantly changing, and things like a solar storm and all of those cosmic rays could actually get through and damage our power grid. So that's a big fear. Now, of course, as it continues to weaken and lets more of this high energy particles through, we may see a increase in the speed of the weakening because those high energy particles are going to begin to strip away our atmosphere. Just like they've stripped away, supposedly many millions or billions of years ago, the atmosphere that we think existed on Mars. We think that at one time Mars had an atmosphere. We know it had water and other things. And it's now a dead planet because it doesn't have an operating magnetic field to sort of shield it from the sun.
What's causing this? Do we know?
We don't know what's causing it. Some people think, and some scientists think, that this could just be part of a natural phenomenon because, every certain period of time, and they don't know exactly how long it is, but it's many, many thousands of years and hundreds of thousands of years, apparently the poles may actually flip and switch. And so there's some question as to whether this overall weakening of the magnetic field is part of the signal that there's going to be a coming flip of the poles. And essentially the magnet's going to reverse polarity, and instead of pushing magnetic ions out of the North Pole and pulling them up the South Pole, it's going to switch and start pushing them out the South Pole and pulling them in the North Pole.
Oh, that's not good.
Now, what are the effects of that? I mean, we don't even know.
UVA and UVB aren't going to help.
But I can tell you this is affecting magnetic north right now today. Magnetic north is moving at an incredible speed, and they're having to rewrite the GPS codes faster than they ever thought possible. I'm Morgan Streetman. That's the way I see it.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.